Welcome guys. So the first thing we'll do will be to cut our shoe cardboard 2.5 inches high. Then we'll add interface to our fabric. We are working with a velvet material. Velvet materials are mostly stretchy. So we add interface and we'll make sure our interface is at least higher than 2.5 inches. So we'll be using this ribbon, and this ribbon will serve in place of our embroidery. So we'll be sewing at the down part and also at the upper part of the ribbon using a matching thread of exactly the same color. After doing that, that is what we got. So as you can see, it looks like an embroidery was done on the fabric we are working with. Then we'll go straight to the making of the cap, and that is by taking our head measurement. And for this, we are using a head size of 19.5 inches. So we'll just mark 19.5 inches on two sides and use a ruler to draw a straight line, and that will be the point of attachment. So the next thing we'll do will be to add gum on opposite sides. So after doing that, you allow it to dry for a few minutes, and you join both. You make sure while joining it doesn't exceed the line you got for your head size. So you just also sew our fabric to 19.5 inches and we'll insert the shoe cardboard into the fabric. After inserting, we'll just trim off the excesses and make sure the excesses at the top and at the bottom is not more than 1 inch. It could be less than 1 inch, but just make sure it's not more than 1 inch, because when bending you don't want the upper part to be overlapping the down part. So the next thing on our menu will be to add gum to the shoe cardboard like that. So I would advise you start with the down part or the upper part, but you just have to know what you're doing. But I would advise you start with the down part, because if you're starting with the down part, it will be more easier for you to arrange the ribbon on the line when bending. So as you can see, we finished bending. So after bending, we'll just adjust our cardboard to get our oval shape. So after getting our oval shape, we'll be using a paper to cut out a sector, and when we open that sector you get 4 sectors, which will give us a spherical shape, and we'll be using that paper to cut out our net. Now this spherical shape we got is just 1/2 inch wider than the circumference of the cap we just finished making. That's the down part of the cap. So the paper will be using it to cut out the foam, and the foam would be 1 inch wider than the paper. Then the fabric would also be 1 inch wider than the foam. So sequentially everything works out just like that. You start from the paper to the foam, then to the fabric. So just attach gum on the foam like that roughly. You attach your gum roughly just to attach your aluminium net. So after applying your gum, we'll attach the aluminium net, and we'll also apply gum on the edges of the net. And this is because we'll be attaching the foam to the edges of the net, because the edges of the net are very sharp. So when you're making your cap, if you don't cover the edges, you might get injured. After doing that, we'll now carefully apply gum to the back part of the foam. And on doing this, you make sure you apply gum to every single part of the foam, because you don't want your fabric to be forming laggings when you're attaching it. You want it to be firmly and smoothly attached to the foam. So after doing that, you will just place the foam at the middle of the fabric, then use your hands to do all the caressing. So the next thing on the list will be to attach our string. Over here we call it tassel. If you are going to the market and you're looking for it, just say you want to buy tassel. So you use your needle and your thread, your hand needle and your thread to attach it. So I can attach it loosely while I'm still working, and while I'm trying to finish off, I'll just adjust to make sure it is firmly attached. And on doing that, you also make sure you used a matching thread. So after attaching the string, we'll be applying gum to the upper part of the down part of this cap. So you carefully apply gum to the upper part, making sure the gum doesn't reach the top of the cap, doesn't reach the tip of the top. So after doing that, we'll just insert the top into the bottom. So on inserting, if you see that what you are doing is not corresponding to the shape you want, you can always take it out and reinsert it again, and make sure your oval shape is evenly spread inwards, because the top of the cap will determine the shape of the cap. So you just make sure you carefully do that, so you place carefully in a way that the oval shape is reflected on the shape of the cap. So when the final result comes out, the cap will look exactly like the shape of the top of the cap. So as you can see, I'm using my hands to do a lot of caressing, making sure the upper part and the down part meet at every point firmly. You have to assure that, make sure there is firm contact between the upper and the lower part. Now there are excesses inwards, so the excesses of the top, you just apply gum underneath. So after applying gum underneath, you will bend and gum the excesses downwards like that. You're doing that so that you don't have rough edges when you're trying to line inside your cap. So you just do that all through. All the excesses of the cap, you apply gum and you bend inwards. So after doing that, we'll be cutting out our lining. In cutting out our lining, the process is pretty simple. Just place your cap on your lining and cut out a rectangular shape that is at least 2 inches wider than the circumference of the cap. So on doing that, you just apply gum inwards all through. So in applying gum all through inside the cap, you just make sure the gum you're applying doesn't get to the tip of the cap, but anything aside the tip of the cap should have a taste of the gum, because the lining will be firmly attached to every single part of the innermost part of the cap, or should I say the inner part of the cap. So you carefully do this because you want your lining to be attached thoroughly. When I mean thoroughly, I mean like every single part of the inner part of the cap should have contact with the lining. So after doing that, you just insert your lining. You can wait for some few minutes for it to dry, because if your gum is not well dried, it will penetrate, or it will form a see-through image on the lining, and you don't want that. So you just wait a few minutes for your gum to dry, then you caress like that. So your caressing is just to make sure that every single part of your lining is touching the inner part of the cap. Then you use your scissors to trim. The trimming is of 2 stages. The first stage is to trim every excesses you are seeing. So after trimming every excesses you are seeing, the next stage will be to trim 1/2 inch below. So you trim it to make sure it is 1/2 inch below the tip of the cap. Then you add gum to a 1 inch ribbon, a black ribbon. So after applying gum, you just attach like you see me doing. Now the black inch ribbon is so because the black color of the, I say ribbon, I mean rubber, the black color of the rubber matches the black color of the lining, so it gives you a perfect finishing. And that is all to be done for the inner part of the cap. So after doing that, you can use a petrol, you can dip a pieces of cloth inside a petrol and clean off every part of the cap that has a stain of gum. So you don't want gum stains on your finished product, so you dip your fabric inside the petrol and clean off, and this is what you get.